Heading into week 13 of the fantasy football season, who are the players that you should be picking up off of waivers to help you make that playoff run? I'm about to tell you. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre here once again to help you make the right decisions off the waiver wire, pick up some players who could help you big down the stretch. And this week, it's sort of the theme of redemption song because there's several players who are making comebacks onto the fantasy scene. Before we get to those picks, let's talk about some injury news. And there were some big names this past weekend. Let's start with the Sunday night game. You may have seen Aaron Rodgers left early and made way for Jordan Love. Now we know that Rodgers has been playing through a thumb injury, which he just disclosed. It's apparently a fracture. Basically, he's got a broken thumb in his throwing hand. That might explain some things. He's having an uncharacteristically inaccurate season throwing interceptions. It happened again in this past game. And so besides that, he also had an oblique injury. Some people thought it was a rib injury. Not sure exactly what's going on there, but it was enough that he left. And then immediately, Jordan Love looked like nothing that we remembered last time Jordan Love played. He was effective, he was accurate, and he immediately wasted no time throwing a long touchdown strike to Christian Watson. Now, granted, Watson did most of the work there, but still, you've got to wonder what's going to happen the rest of the season. Is Rodgers going to miss time? Is Jordan Love somebody you should be looking at? It's too early for me to know the answers to that, but I will say check closely the injury report. If Aaron Rodgers is out, obviously Love is somebody that has some upside. And then the other big name who left early in the game was Travis Etienne, left in the second quarter with a foot injury. Of course, a lot of people worried just when he had kind of emerged into an elite running back. Didn't come back in the game, and he made way for JaMycal Hasty, who actually put up some numbers. But before you go crazy thinking about Hasty as your replacement and benching Etienne because he's going to be out, he himself said after the game, he's good. He thinks he'll play in week 13. He's not the team doctor. We'll see how he practices. You don't know how these things go. So be prepared to make a backup plan if you do have Etienne, but also don't worry too much because it doesn't sound like it's something serious. He's kind of brushing it off. But again, if you're an Etienne owner, you might want to try to find either JaMycal Hasty or don't forget, other reason why you don't necessarily want to bid up too much on Hasty is they added Darrell Henderson from the Rams after he was released just this past week. And Henderson wasn't active this week, which is why he didn't play because he's on a new team. But it wouldn't be surprising if it was basically a 1-2 punch to replace Etienne. But again, Etienne may not even miss this week. So just keep a close eye on that situation, but be prepared to add Hasty or Henderson if needed. And then some receivers whose season's gone from bad to worse, well, now just over. So let's start with Allen Robinson. That's just the next Ram who basically is out for the year. Talking about first to worst. Okay, so Robinson didn't have a very productive year, but now with a foot injury, he's got foot surgery in line because of a stress fracture. And so he has already been ruled out for the rest of the season. Look, some people are saying maybe Van Jefferson now has value because both Cooper Kupp and A-Rob are out. I'm just not touching this Rams offense. So if you want Van Jefferson, go for it. But it better be a really, really deep league. And then Darnell Mooney didn't quite build on last year's success. So Darnell Mooney now is probably going to be out for the rest of the year. It's not confirmed yet, but it says that he might have torn ligaments in his ankle and could require season-ending surgery. So this guy had not really been putting up big numbers for fantasy lately, but again, now at this point, he is clearly droppable. Chase Claypool, good timing they added him. He might be somewhat to add, but again, it's not like this Bears offense has been very good anyways, even with Justin Fields emerging. And I'd like to see that Justin Fields actually even plays first. Don't forget, the Bears' schedule down the stretch is not favorable anyways. They have to play the Packers, the Eagles, and the Bills, and they still have their bye week. So at this point, I just wouldn't add anybody from this passing offense. Elijah Mitchell, who had just come back from injury himself, looks like he might be suffering the same injury as early when week 1, he had an MCL sprain. It sounds like he might have another MCL sprain, although Kyle Shanahan said it's not as serious as the one he suffered early in the season, which is good because he missed several weeks. But again, if he's missing time, we're going to see a lot more CMC. There is no pivot here. Jordan Mason actually got on the field, but I wouldn't recommend adding him unless you are in a deep league and the CMC owner already. Michael Carter of the Jets, just when it looked like the stars were aligned for him to have a huge game. James Robinson, you might know, was Coach's decision, didn't play for as of yet unknown reasons. Not even sure why. And then we had Mike White coming in at quarterback, thought he might get some dump offs. And of course, Michael Carter left early with an injury, only saw 6 carries, didn't do much with them. Don't know the severity yet. He suffered a sprained ankle, so it's not anything very serious, but it doesn't mean he'll play next week either. I do have some pivot options in mind, which I'll get to a little bit later. And last but not least, don't forget, back on Thanksgiving, Damian Harris of the Patriots did leave early, was seen on crutches after the game, and when they got their first warm-up / practice in for this coming week, because they've been off since Thursday, he wasn't on the practice field. He was one of the only Patriots who didn't show up, listing it as a thigh injury right now. Damian Harris has been all sorts banged up since coming into the league, always injured at some point or another, so don't be surprised if he doesn't suit up in Week 13. All right, now here are the waiver wire picks heading into Week 13, and let's start with the fact that E is free. That's right, Elijah Moore is finally free. Well, I mean, he's still in the Jets, but he's actually getting targeted. Now, here's the thing, good and bad. Like, he didn't really get a lot of targets. He only got 2 catches and 2 targets, but he turned them into 64 yards and a touchdown, and someone actually just threw him the ball, and that, of course, was Mike White. Given the fact that they won and actually put up a ton of points, you've got to figure Mike White is going to get at least 1 or 2 more shots, and let's hope it goes better than it did last year when he had that one big start. The schedule is tough, but still, Elijah Moore is such a good receiver. Those of you who follow Reception Perception from Matt Harmon, you know Chris and I are fans of it. Elijah Moore is just flat out a good receiver, knows how to get open. He just needs the ball. Maybe he'll get the ball more. Garrett Wilson was the big story. Of course, he's already rostered in most leagues. Yeah, Garrett Wilson's the guy you want there, but Elijah Moore now at least has some relevance in fantasy again. So he might be a guy worth scooping up because they might have to pass the ball a lot the coming weeks. And there's no better redemption story than Brian Robinson. I mean, obviously we know what happened in the preseason. Recovered from a gunshot wound. Got that starting job back pretty much as soon as he hit the field. But here's the thing. He hasn't really been good lately. He's been getting a lot of carries, but he's been plodding along. One of the worst in the leagues in yards per carry, average down to 3.3. But then week 12 happened, and all of a sudden, we're seeing the upside that Brian Robinson presents. He averaged 5.8 yards per carry, had a 100-yard game, 18 carries, by far outpaced Antonio Gibson, who had been out-touching him over the last week or two. So now all of a sudden, it looks like Robinson's claimed this starting job. He's the lead runner. He's been efficient. And if you saw, he also caught a touchdown pass, and he absolutely trucked that defender on the way to the goal line. This is what we wanted to see from him. So yes, he is relevant again. Definitely worth scooping up. And Washington actually doesn't have 2 bad schedules coming up because they get the Giants twice. And here's the thing, you might not realize, talk about all these bad run defenses. The Giants had, coming into this week, allowed the second most yards per carry to running backs. That's good for Brian Robinson. You know he's got some touchdown upside. Washington keeps winning. So yes, Robinson deserves a spot on fantasy rosters. And then don't call it a comeback again, but Gus Edwards did come back. There's some worry because obviously missed all last season with an ACL tear, missed a lot of this season coming in, and then as soon as he came back and looked dominant, he got hurt again. Couple of weeks rest, he's back, and you know what? The backfield was all his. I mean, literally, he was the only running back who really got run. Kenyon Drake, 2 carries. That's it. And then was all Gus Edwards. He got 16 carries. Now, of course, again, the lead rusher in Baltimore is always going to be Lamar Jackson, but they run the ball so much, it's okay. Gus Edwards definitely has a big role there. He's kind of the bigger back as opposed to Drake. He's getting goal line touches. He did score a touchdown. He wasn't super efficient this game, but again, he's getting all those touches. He's getting goal line work. He has fantasy relevance a lot better in a half or non-PPR format because he really doesn't catch the ball, but still, Gus Edwards, lead back on a run-heavy offense, that means something in fantasy. And then a guy that, you know, is kind of always been a front runner until this year, and you kind of have to root for Trevor Lawrence of the Jaguars because even though he was the number 1 pick and this huge prospect coming into college and looked like he was going to be a future star, last year was just the absolute worst. It could not have gotten worse for that franchise. And you got to think this year he's just glad to be playing under a new regime. He hasn't really taken that step forward. until now, it looks like this might be his signature game. Trevor Lawrence, as you saw, led that comeback, that game-winning drive for a touchdown against Baltimore. Wound up with over 300 yards, in fact, 321 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's not often Lawrence has put up numbers like that. Now, here's the thing. I know Baltimore has given up some chunks of yards to quarterbacks, and they've had their moments, but they have been playing pretty well. This is a defense that had been a lot better lately. And again, it's the way that Lawrence did it. He was composed. He was hitting multiple receivers. It wasn't all Christian Kirk. Zay Jones was the lead receiver. Trevor Lawrence, I wonder if he can carry this forward, because the reason I'm mentioning him in week 13, he gets the Lions. That is obviously a great spot for him. So again, if you're still struggling at quarterback, you've been streaming guys, picking here and there, take a hard look at Trevor Lawrence. This could be a week where he continues his success. And then my kind of sleeper waiver wire pick for this week, let's take a look at Zonovan Knight. Who? That's right. Zonovan Knight is maybe the starting running back for the New York Jets at this point, because I already mentioned James Robinson was benched, a healthy scratch. Don't know why. Don't know if that'll carry on next week. Look, maybe he comes back, but it wouldn't be surprising if he doesn't, because they did just fine without him, and he just hasn't been effective recovering from his Achilles ever since the first few weeks. That's why he was traded by the Jaguars. And then Michael Carter, already mentioned, he's got a sprained ankle. Not sure if he'll go this coming week, but if so, you got to figure he's not 100%. And look, here's the thing. Ty Johnson, another veteran that they've had, he looked pretty good statistically, but only got a few carries. The lead back when Michael Carter went out and James Robinson was sitting on the bench was Zonovan Knight, an undrafted free agent from NC State. And he got 14 carries, turned it into 69 yards. He was actually pretty good. Other reason you got to like Knight is because, much like Michael Carter, his proficiency is as a pass catcher. He can get those dump offs. Didn't do a lot in this game. Didn't really need to, because they were running ahead all game long. But look, Zonovan Knight, again, for deeper leagues, for places where you're just looking for a stash, somebody who might have significance down the stretch, is definitely worth a look. Those are the names you need to know heading into Week 13. Don't forget to catch us live Tuesday night as we break down waiver wire decisions, trade decisions for those who still have their deadlines not passed, and check out everything you need to know to help win start sit decisions and more. A Week 13 playlist right here.